You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency? Hey guys, welcome back to Monster 911 with your host, Lance Hightower. You're in for a treat today, as this is the first episode of a fascinating two-part interview. This episode delves into a gentleman's story dating back to his childhood spent in East Texas and the trauma he experienced because of what he saw one particular night. I am really honored and humbled that Don was so willing to share his very personal story with us, as I'm sure you listeners realize it can be very difficult sharing details of these kinds of events that have had such a deep psychological impact on oneself. It took some time to set up this interview, but it was definitely worth it, and I think you guys are really going to be gripped by what this gentleman had to say. Some really vivid imagery sticks out from Don's testimony of huge teeth and eyes peering at him from behind his mobile home window. Some really, really scary stuff. Thanks for tuning in, guys, as always. And if you want to show your support for the podcast show, then you can head over to www.monster911.com and grab a t-shirt for yourself, a family member, or friend. You know, these cryptid conferences now are in full swing in many states, and these shirts help show your support in this community. And if you had any sightings that you can't explain, then don't hesitate to get in touch. You can call my toll-free number, 1-866-306-8085, or if you prefer, you can fill in the details of your sighting on the contact portion of our website. Now kick back and listen to this intriguing part one of When I Pulled the Curtain Back, It Was Baring Its Teeth at Me. Well, going back to the Honabi, did you listen to anything that's interesting out there after we met, and anything you learned out there or gleaned any information from some of the seminars?
Well, there's really nothing that's happened since then, or that I learned from there. I was interested to see, but it was the first big outing that I went to that had a lot of like-minded folks, that had experiences, and it was interested in listening to a lot of the people that were walking through the different tents and stuff, talk about their personal experiences. And that was one thing that really affected my wife, because up until that point she'd only heard me talk about the things that I experienced, and she was just really taken back by how many people were just freely talking about the things that they've gone through and things that they've seen. And she said, it really surprised me that people were just so forward about talking about the things that they've experienced. And I said, well, from my point of view, in that particular environment, you're with like-minded people. You're with people that have experienced similar things, that they've had nobody that they could talk to, nobody that could relate to what they're going through or what they've gone through. And at that kind of place, you've got folks that are open to hear it without worry about ridicule or people, thinking that you're nuts, or, doubting your story on just the fact that it is so far out there.
Well, and that's the thing, is that you do have a lot of people that their guards are down, and there's no one there to judge. It's and people that go for the first time, they're just taking it all in. I would like to see, each conference is a little bit different. I have not been to one, but one, and I've been there multiple times there at Honabi. But I've got some friends that have been that actually live there in Honabi, and they've been to several other ones in Texas, and I think most of the seminars, I'd like to see them changed. I'd like to see actually some, not only talking about the creatures, but I'd like someone to talk about the MIBs,
Right.
who they are, how to head them off, what to look for, what's their purpose, has anyone encountered these people, things like that. No one's really talking about.
Right. That's really one of the most guarded things in the whole community is
Mm-hmm.
that people with knowledge guard it like the most precious gem that they don't want anybody else to have. And that's really the sad part, is because the folks that actually experience this stuff need that information. The whole point of me researching, whenever I realized that what I was experiencing wasn't just a dream, it was a reality of what had happened as a child. When I realized the reality of it, I went into research mode. I want to know everything that I could possibly learn about it, because I need to know. Knowledge is power. If you don't have knowledge, you can't protect yourself. You can't protect your family. It's not safe for me in the woods. It's not safe for my children in the woods. Everything that I went through as a child made me who I am as a man. I didn't change the fact that I went into the woods, because I was raised in the woods. I was raised walking through the woods and playing in the woods at 3 years old. When my parents were really, really young whenever I was born. My mom was 14 when she had me. So
Oh, wow.
I had a childhood like nobody's business. It was ridiculous. My mom would let me just go. And that's one of the reasons that I experienced so much, all the things that I did, because I was walking through the woods to neighbor's house a mile and a half down the road through the woods at 3 and 4 years old. But it was normal. They expected it because they all communicated. They all were on a party line back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
And she would get on the phone and ask anybody seen Willie down here. He's down here at my house, and we're chasing butterflies, and he's fine. I'm letting you know he's okay. And so everybody was looking out for me. And so there was a little old lady that was about a mile behind us that I'd walk down her house, and she would cook little sweets and things like that. And I'd hang out with her and help her in her garden and do different things. Not much, but, it seemed like a big thing for me as a child at that age. And then I would come up and I'd go to another lady's house that was half a mile or so down the road, the opposite direction. And she is always cooking and that kind of stuff. Everybody wanted to feed you whenever I was growing up, wherever you went. And I loved that because I love food. So it was always about getting a cookie or a piece of pie or, a glass of sweet tea. It was, and it was just part of my day. And as a 3 and 4 year old, that was my thing. I was out early. I was out before daylight usually, playing with the dogs. I was under the house, digging in the dirt, or I was out in the woods. And then if I was at my grandparents' house, I was out in the woods there. I didn't let it affect me as much. I didn't think, because I thought it was natural. It was something that I saw all the time. I saw wolves all the time, even though they weren't supposed to exist in this area.
Now, what area what area are you talking about?
I'm in East Texas.
East Texas, okay.
I'm in County, which is right in the center of the East Texas border.
Okay.
Okay, and so I'm about 20 miles from the border. And our families had property here for 10 generations.
Wow.
We were in Texas before Texas was a state. We had property that was granted from the Spanish government, and then it was then a land grant from the Republic of Texas, and it was started at 10,000 acres, and until 10 years ago, it was 365 acres, and that's where I grew up.
Wow.
And my grandfather and his brothers and cousins and all hunted, and everybody in this area that were, of the same last name were kin to each other, or kin by marriage. I mean, if you were part of this area, that far back, most likely we're kinfolks. But
Okay.
they lived off the land. He grew cattle, he grew gardens, and he hunted off the land. And there for a long, long time, he had. I know whenever he passed, he had over 100 head of cattle, and whenever I was little, he had even more than that. In fact, he had problems with these giant wolves eating his cows, and so they went on night hunts, and then he set out some pretty barbaric traps. I ended up with a couple of them after he died, and what they were treble hooks, big treble hooks, about half as big as your palm of your hand, with a chain on them. And they had about 30 foot of chain, and they were chained up into a tree. And so the wolf had to jump up to get it, and it would hang itself.
Oh,
It would hang itself on that treble hook. And then he'd come along, and if it didn't kill it, he would kill it then.
Wow. Now, was this wolves, or was this a Dogman creature that you didn't know that it was a Dogman creature?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. And I'm going to explain it to you, and you'll have to make up your own mind.
Okay.
Okay. So these wolves were really huge. Granddaddy was 6'4". Okay. He brought one up to the house one night and showed us and my grandmother threw a big fit because he had this dead wolf, this giant wolf in the backyard. He drug it in with his tractor. Usually he would have thrown it over the back of his mule because he always went hunting. Every time he went off in the woods, he went off with his mule. That's just an old coon hunter, always went out with his mule. But he brought this one in with his tractor. It was a really big wolf.
Man.
When it was on the ground, from the tip of its nose to its rump was at least a foot longer than he was tall. Man. And I thought that, as a memory, I thought that's got to be an exaggeration. That there's no way that wolf was that big. But I called my dad, and my dad's really kind of a no-nonsense kind of guy. He's really a matter of fact. And I asked him about some of the memories of things that I had, my recurring dream that I had as a kid, and that I realized was actually an actual experience with, I think, a Dogman. And the memory of this wolf. And I asked Daddy, I said, do you remember coming out to get us at Grandmama and Granddaddy's house and him bringing that big she-wolf up behind the house? He said, yeah, that was a monster, wasn't it? I said, yeah, I was really remembering that wolf to be a foot longer than he was tall. He said it was. It was the biggest wolf I ever seen in my life. And I said, so I'm remembering it to be a foot longer than he was tall. Him being 6'4", that wolf was at least 7 foot long from the tip of his nose to his rump. He said, yeah, that's best I can remember. That's about right.
Wow.
I said, so if that wolf were to stand up on its back legs, it would have been
8 to 9 feet.
Tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking a wolf then.
It looked like a giant timber wolf is what it looked like, but wolves don't get that big.
No, not the ones that we're aware of. I mean, did he happen to measure not only the length, but how about the width, where the length of the front legs to the hunch in the back?
No, and as far as I know, he didn't measure it. Now I know he skinned it out, but everything that he has gone. He actually had a attic full of wolf hides.
Really?
Yeah, they were the biggest damn things you ever seen. It was scary for me to go in the attic because it was like a pack of wolves were hanging. Literally, it was a pack of giant timber wolves hanging all the way through his attic, all the way through the rafters. He had cow hides up there too, of his favorite bulls that died. He skinned them out, and of course he always kept the leathers from all his cows that died, all of his deer. He always did all the leather. He saved all the leathers because he used it for chairs and that sort of stuff on the back porch and all that business. But the wolves, they were all in fur. I mean, he kept kept them with the fur intact. So it was kind of spooky in the attic.
What did he ever do with those furs?
They were all in the attic until the property sold, and then the new landowner that purchased that house burned everything. Yeah,
Oh
it was
man.
it was really after everything that's happened in the last say 10 years of my existence and the realization of what exactly happened in my childhood. I wish I could go back and gather all that stuff because I would, and they would have given it to me without any problem because they didn't want it.
Sure. Well, something
But
that long, it's fair to say, if you were extrapolating length to height, um, that something that long, usually it's going to be somewhat a little more than half. Usually a canine, if you take the length from the nose to the buttock, and if you split that, it's usually not an exact split. So if we are at what we say a little over 7 feet,
hmm
so it's 6 feet, that's 3 feet long. 3.5 is 7 feet long, and usually the wither is going to be a little bit more than half. So let's just say it's around 4 to 4.5 feet to the wither. I mean,
right,
if you look at that, I mean, you're talking something that you're looking eye to eye with now. So that
that's
is
big,
that's
but that wasn't the biggest one.
really
The biggest one was at my aunt's house. That was 5 miles down the road, and it was a solid black one that looked like a timber wolf as far as all the fur and everything. But it looked at me over a five-strand barbed wire fence and actually hopped that fence just like it was nothing to it, coming toward me in the yard, chased me back in the house. And
jeez,
that one was bigger than this one.
really.
That one was wide. It was at least 3.5 foot, 4 foot wide. Looked like it was a monster. I mean, it literally was a monster. It scared me. When I went into the house to my aunt's, I told her, I said, "There's a giant wolf out there coming down the high line, and he jumped that fence, and he's bigger than the fence." And my uncle grabbed a gun out of the gun cabinet and ran outside and hollered for his daddy. His daddy lived right next door, and they got together and they went out with guns, and they came back like an hour later, and they said it's okay that he ran off, but they wouldn't let me go back outside. That was in 1975.
I was going to ask what year that was. 75 in East Texas.
And I know that that was a year because that same day, my uncle's dad gave me a Bible, and it had the date in it. It was a little children's Bible, little New Testament,
Okay.
and it had the date. I don't have that Bible anymore. My house burned here a few years ago, and I lost everything in it. But
Sorry to hear that,
it
man.
was 1975 on the date.
75, golly. And this came. How far was it when you first saw this wolf?
It was probably 100 yards, maybe
So
a little less.
you glanced up, or you just glanced up?
I was out playing in the yard, and I had looked over there down the pipeline. I always did. The deer usually were over there down that pipeline. And when I looked down there, I saw that wolf. And it was just in the edge of the woods. And then it stepped out and saw me. And I realized how big it was because I could see it over the fence and not through the fence.
Wow, you could see it over the
And
fence.
when it came
Wow.
to the fence, it just kind of hopped over it and just kept coming. And as it was coming, I saw it, and it scared me, so I ran back in. I mean, I wasn't 20 yards from the front door, so
Wow. Wow. I mean, there was probably no one outside, it sounds like. Had it been.
no, it wasn't. They were all inside.
So had you not seen it when you did,
It could have been bad.
it could have, like, I mean, I bring it up not to accentuate the what if here, but I'm just saying that in your opinion, I mean, if this was another kid and these things came up, and adults, it'd only take a second before
If it wanted to, I think as fast, it wasn't moving as fast as I think they can. It just hopped over the fence and was easing in that direction. I think if it really, really wanted to, it could have reached me.
wow.
So I think it was trying to scare me. I think it was trying to force me back in the house. Is what I think. I think if it really wanted to hurt me, it would have.
Wow.
And I'm actually going in reverse order of the things that happened. But
No, no, that's okay. That's okay. This that's
before that incident, I was at the lady half a mile away from the house, north of the house, down the highway. Her house. I went to see her one evening. It was, I say one evening, one afternoon, around 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And when I got to her house, I came through the barbed wire fence and came up to her backyard, and there was a big dog standing on two legs, looking in her back window.
what?
And it looked like a Doberman, but it was tall. It wasn't like super tall. It looked like it might be 5 foot tall, but it could have been a Doberman, but it didn't have the tan markings. It was solid black. It had pointed ears like a Doberman, and it had a pointed snout like a Doberman. I didn't notice anything odd other than the fact that it was leaning up on her back of her house, looking in her window, and she didn't have a dog.
Did it have a tail?
I didn't notice it having a tail because whenever I saw it, we come around the house, I saw it standing there. It lurched at me, and I ran into the fence, the barbed wire fence, and then I jumped through the barbed wire fence, cutting my leg. I've got a scar on my knee from it. And it didn't get me. It didn't bite me. It didn't touch me. It didn't growl. It just lurched at me.
Well, that's
So I
not a
went
normal
on.
feature of dogs standing on two
It's
legs.
not.
I mean,
It
it's
scared me.
that's the thing is that that's when the hairs on your neck stand up because that's not a normal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right now, my hair on my arm standing up. But it is something that happened. And when I went home and I told Daddy, I said, a big Doberman jumped at me because he asked what happened, why my knee was cut and why I was bleeding. I said, I jumped through a barbed wire fence and my leg caught on the barbed wire. He said, you're lucky it didn't kill you, son. Dobermans are bad. He said, they're notorious for being dangerous guard dogs. And I said, I can't remember the lady's name, but I said, Miss So-and-so, she does not have a Doberman. She don't have a dog, but it was there. And she said, well, why do you think it's a Doberman? I said, because it looked like our grandpa's red Doberman. He got a red one, but this one didn't have any markings on its face. It was solid black. And it was short haired, slick, just like a Doberman.
Did you
But
notice any eye color or anything like that?
I don't remember eye color or anything other than the fact that his ears were standing up tall and his nose was long. I saw a side profile and I saw it jumping at me, and I darted.
Yeah.
And so I can't even say that it went down on four legs because I didn't see it happen. I
So
saw him moving in that direction, and I was trying to get away.
so when you saw it standing, was it leaning on the house or was it standing freely on two
Yeah.
legs?
It was leaning on the house. So it is possible that it could have been a big dog.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm not saying that was a dog man.
Sure. Sure.
I'm saying it looked odd and it scared the hell out of me with everything else that's been happening with wolves and the thing that looked in my window prior to this. It made me wonder.
Well, I'm not saying
Right.
dogs don't do that. You know, they get on doors and they can look in because
Sure.
they do that, but you don't see it that often. I'll just say that.
Right. Yeah. And see, the thing about this is all of these things that happen, and there's a few more things that I'll tell you about this happened out there in that particular area after this initial incident. And as I've remembered things that have happened, it's like connect the dots.
Uh-huh.
Okay, all these things, they're related. What are they? I'm not sure. What could they be? I'm not sure. But I think that they're related. I can tell you that the very first thing that happened, I was 4 years old. And the only reason I know that I was four is my brother had not been born yet. We're 4 years apart.
Okay.
I was born with a calcium deficiency, so my legs and my knees hurt really bad when I was growing. And for months and months at a time, my ankles would hurt. It'd wake me up in the middle of the night. I'd hurt and hurt, and I'd cry. I'd holler for my mom, and she'd come down the hall, and she'd rub my ankles until I fell asleep. Well, I remember one night waking up, and my ankles were hurting, as usual. But I looked up on my window, and our window had kind of sheer blinds on them. You couldn't really see all the way through, but you could see shadows for thing on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And what I saw on the other side was the head of a wolf, pointed ears on the top, and a snout, and it was wide as my window was. And it scared me. And I thought, oh, what is that? And I reached and I pulled the curtain open. And what I saw on the other side of that window was looking down at me.
Oh my gosh.
And his eyes were reflecting my nightlight that was on the floor there beside my bed.
Oh man.
And his teeth were all shining. It scared me really, really bad. It had this look on its face. The only way I can describe it is if you've seen the modern cartoon Zootopia. It's got the fox that's on there.
Okay.
And when the fox grabs the rabbit and he goes into this bloodlust and he's wiping his hands, rolling his hands together, and his eyes are all buggy and he's licking his lips.
Yes.
Fixing to get the rabbit.
Yes.
Well, that's the look that this thing had in its eyes. He wasn't rolling his hands or anything like that. I didn't even see hands. But this head was as wide as my window.
Oh my gosh.
Now, it was a standard mobile home, so however wide a mobile home window is, it's a big head. The house was 3.5, 4 foot off the ground, another 2.5, 3 foot to the bottom of the window, and he was looking down from the top of the window.
Man.
As I screamed, which I did at that point, my mother heard me and came running in to check on me. I told her, I said, Mama, a wolf is in the window. She said, no, baby, you just saw a shadow. You saw a reflection or something of your covers in the window. I said, no, Mama, I saw a wolf in the window. She said, no, baby, it's okay. There's no wolf in the window. And she pulled my drapes.
But she didn't see anything.
She didn't see it. But that same night, she had something look in her window. And she told Daddy the next day. And I asked Daddy, did he remember that? And he said, I don't remember. I said, well, son, I said, Daddy, do you remember saying that there's no way somebody looked in that window because they'd have to be taller than Ed Too Tall Jones, which was a professional football player.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay. I said, you said that. You remember that? He said, I remember saying that. Hey, cut it out. I'm sorry.
No, no, it's okay. Mine was just in here earlier.
And so he said, "Yeah, I remember saying that now." I said, "Well, that same night, that thing looked at my window."
Really? What did he say?
So that I can tell you was painted. The colors of it was was like a fox. It was red and white.
Really?
It had white under his chin and white down his chest, and it was reddish right there, what I could see. Because as I began to yell, it began to back away from the window. It backed up into the shadows
While it was still standing.
while it was standing there. It backed away from the glass, out of sight.
And you didn't have any outside lights to that window. I mean, it was just pitch black.
No, actually there was a booger light, well, what we call a booger light, security light, on the north end of the house. I was on the west side of the house, so I was in the shadow of the mobile home.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So you could see light out into the yard to the right, directly behind my window, about 30 foot, 40 foot, was a big pine tree. Big pine tree. And it backed up underneath that pine and then disappeared.
Man, what a horrifying sight.
Now that was a recurring nightmare for years into my adulthood. And I didn't realize that it was real until maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
And after waking up in sweats and yelling, and my wife saying, "Are you okay?" Yeah, it's just a really bad dream. And after having the dream over and over and over and over again, I've always had an interest in wolves and werewolves since then.
Mm-hmm.
A fascination, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But after that last dream, I realized I had to do something. I had to figure out what was going on. Is it possible that that recurring nightmare was a memory, not just a dream? And so the more I thought about it, the more I had to find out. And when I finally asked my mom about the memory, she said, "Yeah, I remember you telling me that it was something outside your window, that there was a wolf in your window." I said, "Mama, you remember after all that's said and done, and I ended up having to go get caps for my teeth because my teeth were crumbling because of calcium deficiency." She said, "Yeah." I said, "What did I call those teeth?" She said, "You call them your wolf teeth." I
Wow.
said, "You know why?" She said, "No, we never did know why." I said, "Because they shine when I looked in the mirror, just like that wolf that shined in my bedroom window." I said, "I knew if I had teeth as shiny as his, I'd scare him off if he ever come back." Fortunately for me, he never did.
Man. Well, it's was something like that, that terrifying, that horrific of a sight to a 4-year-old, and trying to discern reality from someone, your mom saying it's not. I mean, a lot of people will say, Lance, children cannot suffer emotional PTSD, traumatic experiences, and I'm going to say that's not true. You can. There's no age discrimination when it comes to severe emotional trauma like PTSD. And with the sight of something so large, so close, and that you were seeing the expression on the face, and it doesn't take much even for a kid to understand what expressions look like. Something that can elicit an expression is terrifying enough. I mean, it's standing, it's huge, and it's giving this facial expression to the level where you can still remember it to this day, and obviously it was showing, baring its teeth. That's very terrifying, very terrifying, not only for any kid, any adult for that matter, because that's the biggest fear, is pulling back the window, right? We see this in the movies. You know, something happens behind the window and the audience is saying, "Don't do it, don't do it." You know, you open a door, pull back. I mean, that's one of those fears that even directors of making horror movies know that we all fear: pulling back something and finding the unknown. So, oh man, I am so sorry. That is
It's actually gotten a lot easier the more that I've thought about it. Initially when I was supposed to call and do this interview, and the closer I got to it and the more I dug in my memories, the harder it was to live it and think about trying to share it, and it was just so much. I just couldn't do it. I wasn't ready yet. And so the more I talked about it with my wife, and the more I went through the memories on my own, and the more when I talked to my dad, and I talked to my mom, and then I talked to my little brother, and I asked my little brother, I always shared stuff with him, and I asked him this recently. I said, Bubba, you remember me talking to you about something that was looking in my window? He said, yeah. He said, that's what caused me to be scared of werewolves my entire life. I said, you serious? He said, yeah. He said, a little later, he said, I tried to tie it in with Amityville Horror, and the pig that looked in the window, or the red eyes of Jody, the pig, the devil looking in the window. He said, but I still remember you telling me. I said, well, it was true. It happened. It wasn't the devil. I can't really say what it was, but I know that it's some kind of Dogman or something.
Well, I would say that at this point in time, that's what I would call it, based on some of the characteristics and behaviors that we now associate with this creature, and that is an unusual sense of intelligence. In other words, it's not normal for canines to walk around
Right.
on its legs. It's abnormal and supernatural for something to walk around like that. Secondly, canines, even the indigenous wildlife such as wolves, typically don't get that big. They don't.
No, we had German Shepherds in my yard from the time I was old enough to walk. Our German Shepherds were German Shepherds. They were 120 pounds. They were big German Shepherds. These things that I've seen, including the wolves, made our German Shepherds look really small.
Yeah, I get that question a lot as people say, okay, Lance, where did this come from? If it didn't, where did this? And I can't fully answer that because I don't know. Is it possible they have been here a very, very long time? And I'm going to say yes, it is. So how did it become in the breeding? What may have diverged in the line of breeding? I don't know. I don't know what crossed for it. I don't know if this is a different branch of canines that...
I think it's got to be something else. I think it's got to be some sort of Nephilim or...
That's the other
like
part.
that.
The supernatural is something...
I have to look at it from a Christian background point of view, and studying from the ministry for 5 years. It's something. The only thing that I can do that allows me to function with it. It's got to have a biblical explanation.
Yes, and I think it really does. And I know, these are a lot of things that people debate, but in my opinion, everything can be explained biblically. Now, I'm not going to say that the word Dogman is in there or Sasquatch or Bigfoot because it is not. But the Nephilim, or their offspring,
Sure.
the Nephilim, when you look, they were in bondage. If you look at it from a biblical standpoint, but
Right.
what wasn't in bondage was their offspring, the Gibor,
Yeah.
and
Right.
they were a beast. They don't get specific, but if they were giants, the beast of giants, or giant beast, if you will,
It,
then could they look all kinds of different ways? I mean, whether it's
polluted every flesh, every plant, everything.
yes,
So it's possible that it could look any kind of way.
there you go. And so, in my mind, this gives an explanation as to Dogman, Bigfoot, Mothman, Lizard
Yeah.
Man, Ram
Absolutely.
Man, all these
Right.
different bizarre descriptive characteristics that people have close encounters with. There was another gentleman that we had an encounter with something out in this swamp area, Louisiana, that looked like a praying mantis. That
Right.
was huge, man size. So I think that the world is a lot more mysterious than what we ever imagined and ever known about. Now, is it possible? Is it possible that some of these creatures are extraterrestrial? I'm going to say yes. Yes, it is very possible that they did not have an origin here on Earth. But I believe that a portion, the majority of them are origination here on Earth. And this gets back to this government agency, this group that we collectively call the MIBs, that they have been around for decades, and
Right.
these creatures are so terrifying and fall underneath this intellectual supernatural realm, mysterious realm, that it falls underneath a security issue, a national security issue for the public, that this group feels. Now, I don't speak for them, obviously, but I'm just speaking aloud here, that by letting the truth out to Joe Q citizen, it would cause a panic. There would be issues. There would be people wanting to never go out. It's a matter of revenue funding issue. It's a matter of panic. So I think that this group, their main mission is suppression of what is really in existence, roaming our woods and our oceans, and even so far as what's in the air. So, yeah, it definitely gets into some interesting discussion and dialogue, but I think it can be explained biblically. I think that there have been certain cultures that have seen these for hundreds of years, and in their culture, in their language, in their song and dances, I think that they do describe these creatures, these wolf or Sasquatch and other types of creatures that they have seen for multiple generations.
For thousands of years, they've been in almost every culture in one form or fashion.
Yes.
All the research that I've done is shown dogman looking things out there, and almost every culture has a name for it. The same way as Bigfoot.
Uh-huh.
It's they're in all cultures. You get to looking at it. I mean, I don't know how many thousands of years ago.
And see, that's
It
just
goes.
it. It permeates a lot longer, and most of us, I think the average citizen, they hear this stuff and they go, "Oh, that's just legend and lore and wives' tales and scary stories to get the kids to come in early, from getting lost in the dark." And
Right. Well, even the Greeks talked about dealing. They hired the dog-headed men as warriors to fight other clans. If you look at Greek history and you look back at all the different things they talked about these dog-headed people